You may be walking over a fortune in gold and not even know it. If you're in the South End or parts of uptown Charlotte or walking near some of the most expensive real estate in the city, there's a decent chance that somewhere beneath your feet are old mine shafts, abandoned tunnels, and veins of gold that helped build Charlotte long before anyone called it a banking town. Folks outside North Carolina rarely know that the first gold rush in the United States was not in California or even Alaska. It was here in the Charlotte metro region. The story goes that in 1799, a 12-year-old boy named Conrad Reed was playing in Little Meadow Creek in Cabarrus County, not far from Charlotte, when he found a large yellow rock. It weighed about 17 pounds. And his family had no idea what it was, so they naturally used it as a doorstop for several years, until his father took it to a jeweler in Fayetteville, who later identified it as gold and bought it from him for a whopping amount of $3.50. Now, I'm not 100% certain of the accuracy of that legend, but I sure do like the story. It's probably the most expensive doorstop mistake in American history, and if nothing else, it's made people in the area look around a little bit when they see something shiny in a river. Unfortunately, there is also a lot of pyrite in this part of the world, which is another term for fool's gold. The important part is this: once people figured out what was in the ground, North Carolina's gold rush was on. At first, they found what is called placer gold, which is loose gold washed into creeks and stream beds. That's the sort of gold people imagine from the movies, panning in water and hoping to see a bright yellow flash at the bottom of the pan. By the mid-1820s, miners had learned that gold was also buried underground in veins of white quartz rock, and the whole business changed. That kind of gold required shafts, tunnels, crushing equipment, big money, and a great deal more work. North Carolina supplied all of the native gold coined in the United States Mint in Philadelphia before 1829, and by the 1830s, Charlotte had become the center of the region's gold business. So much gold was coming out of this area that Congress authorized a branch of the United States Mint in Charlotte in 1835. The old Charlotte Mint opened in 1837 on West Trade Street, long before Charlotte became known for banks, glass towers, and people in dark suits with expense accounts. That's one of the things I love about this city. Charlotte did not become a financial center by accident. Before we were counting and storing money, we were literally digging it out of the ground. And this was not some tiny side business. Of the roughly 700 gold mines that operated in North Carolina during the 19th century, the Rudisill and the St. Catherine mines in Charlotte were among the largest. The state historical marker on South Boulevard at Bland Street says it plainly. Charlotte was the center of the region's gold rush after 1825, and the Rudisill and the St. Catherine mines were near here, or there, as the case may be, where the sign is. If you've walked around the South End, eaten at a restaurant there, gone to a brewery or a bakery, ridden the light rail, or paid an absurd amount of money for an apartment with exposed brick and a dog wash station, you have probably been in Charlotte's old gold country. The Rudisill mine was around Mint Street and Summit Streets, and the St. Catherine mine was not far away from that location. They were part of the same gold-bearing lode running through what is now one of the most developed parts of the city of Charlotte. Old accounts and later geological work describe mine workings running under that area around West Morehead Street, Interstate I-277, Mint Street, and the land just south of what is now known as Bank of America Stadium. There are still old shafts all over Charlotte. Most have been sealed, some have been forgotten, and every now and then one of them gets accidentally dug up, reminding everyone of our history involving mining for gold. In fact, a few years ago, a local woman discovered what experts believed was an old mine tunnel after a hole opened in the dirt floor of her basement. The odd part of this story isn't that there was a mine, but rather that someone in Charlotte actually had a basement. That indeed is pretty rare in these here parts. Now, when I was in college, I worked for a geotechnical and civil engineering firm that did subsurface work around Charlotte. We worked on what became the Bank of America Tower, 2 First Union, and a good part of the city that was being built upward in the mid-80s and early 90s. And I was told then, quietly, because it was not exactly something developers wanted advertised, that they kept hitting veins of gold. It was not like we were drilling into Fort Knox. It was a construction problem more than a treasure hunt. But after hearing that enough times, times. Every time I went on to a new job site, I found myself looking at the courts and hoping maybe, just maybe, well, that never materialized. But I looked, and honestly, to this day, I still do. The geology makes the story even better. The early easy gold was in the creeks. The later Charlotte gold was harder to get to. Around the Rudisill lode, the old engineering and mining reports describe the ore zone as dipping down at about a 45-degree angle. In other words, the gold did not sit there in a neat little horizontal layer waiting for somebody with a shovel. It slanted down through the earth. When gold is locked inside quartz, you have to break the rock, crush the ore, and separate the gold from everything around it. In the 19th century, that process commonly involved mercury amalgamation, which is exactly as unpleasant as it sounds. So yes, there may still be gold under Charlotte, but no, that does not mean the next person sipping on a $19 cocktail in the South End can simply dig down a few inches and possibly retire by Tuesday. I've heard for quite some time that there may be more gold still left in the ground in North Carolina than there ever was in California. Now, I don't know whether that's literally true, and I've never found a source I would trust enough to swear to it, but the thought is not crazy for this reason. California mined gold on a scale North Carolina never did. Here, a great deal of the gold was harder to reach, harder to process, and eventually buried under a growing city. Charlotte quit being a gold town because banks, railroads, textiles, and then skyscrapers became better business than chasing quartz veins underground. Even the University of North Carolina at Charlotte somehow ended up with a gold miner as its mascot. Technically, the 49ers name comes from 1949, the year the school was saved and became Charlotte College, not from the gold rush. But the university itself acknowledges that it is a happy coincidence that the campus sits on Highway 49 in a region with such a rich gold mining history. It's one of those accidents that feels too perfect to be an accident. Like a lot of North Carolina history, the gold story is not all quaint or charming. Enslaved labor was used in early North Carolina gold mining too. John Reed and his partners supplied enslaved workers to dig for gold at the Reed site, and enslaved people worked in other North Carolina mines as the industry grew. So even this story, with the absurd doorstop and hidden tunnels under breweries, still belongs in the full history of the state, but not just the shiny part of it. I still love the strange physical truth of it, that you may literally be walking over a gold mine. And Charlotte is a city that seems determined to rebuild itself about every 15 minutes. We knock down what was there, we put up something taller, we rename a neighborhood, and act as if the story began last week. But under the condos, under the light rail, under the stadium, under the banking towers, the older city is still there. Before Charlotte was Wall Street South, it was gold country. And the next time you're walking through the South End, surrounded by the breweries, apartments, and people who look like they have pretty strong opinions about oat milk, it's worth remembering that a century and a half before any of that, folks were underground beneath those same streets, chasing veins of gold through the dark. You may in fact be walking over a fortune. You're certainly walking over history.